gave up hope, looking for a way to cope, all alone in a castle by yourself, knowing you were made to rule, looking like a royal fool. If you only had someone to help. We got to clean these rodents out. There ain't no way we're gonna let them run this place. I'll show them what this king's about. It won't be long before we get them on the run. Here's what I propose we do. I'm gonna count on you. Give you all the cheese that you could ever want. If you wanna be your best, put your trap up to the test. Buy some super brie and watch the suckers come. Oh, yeah. We got to clean these rodents out. There ain't no way we're gonna let them run this place. I'll show them what this king's about. It won't be long before we get them on the run. We got to clean these rodents out. There ain't no way we're gonna let them run this place. I'll show them what this
Hello, MouseHunt. Welcome to Feedback Friday. Today is, what day is it? It is March 24, 2023. Hello to everybody in the chat. My name's Dave. Hope everyone is doing well today. I think we got some early birds, early hunters, early mice. I don't know what analogy to use there. The Math Awakening was in bright and early. I think my chat actually disconnected. I didn't see you right there at the start till I hit the button here. Tarako, early riser as well. Arctic in the chat before the stream even started. Hello to you three. Chip, hello. Hey, Nathan, nice to see you, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Mock, hello to you. Hunting in the Bristle Woods Rift. Arctic is having their bait stolen by a paragon. Hopefully your luck turns around in the floating islands sooner than later. Chip, Arctic, Tarako, Jason, hello to you. Michelle, nice to see you. Michelle, notice a nice little disclaimer you got there. Yeah, we're gonna kind of share some work in progress this week for sure in terms of charms, and a lot of it is aimed to get feedbacks, initial impressions, sentiment, see what conversations come up, help kind of guide those final decisions, right? And just want to make sure nobody thinks it's a demo of like here's what's to come, but we got a little bit of a working version of it. And we kind of want to see what impressions there are to help us fine tune things, if there is anything to fine tune. Hello to you, Tim. Hello to you in the chat. Salim, Jason, any signs of spring there yet? Just about. It's a sunny day here. I'll take that. And it's starting to be above freezing. Look, it's 2 degrees out today, so I'll take it. Just in time for the spring, with the spring egg hunt around the corner. The first signs of spring are showing up. Hello, Sunny in the chat. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Peter, good morning. Gary, good morning. Yashira, good hello to you as well. Well, on that note, we can get into things a little bit here. Dev Jake has been putting a lot of great work into overhauling charms a little bit. If that's not too much of a paradox there of overhauling just a little bit, but making some adjustments to charms, we'll put it that way. I wasn't quite sure what to start with, but maybe we'll start with the charm progression. Kind of, there's a few moving parts involved in some of the work he's been putting into this. And one is just kind of when do you have access to which charms? So that might be a good starting point. Looking to add a charm shop to all the locations. I don't think there are any exceptions to that rule. I think maybe the Meadow doesn't have a charm shop, but basically once you unlock charms, the goal there is no matter where you're hunting, you can go to the charm shop and there's at least something there that's somewhat applicable to that area, that title requirement for that area. Kind of like what did with the Trapsmith, right? Added a Trapsmith to pretty much every location in the game. And if you visit the Trapsmith, it kind of guides you a little bit more. It kind of shows you, hey, these are some traps that are appropriate for either the area or the title of the area or close to it. There might be a few traps from, a lower level area, but if you didn't get this one yet, you should probably get this, or it even just helps you kind of compare one trap to the next one. Nervo saying first sunburn of the year. I don't know if I'm jealous or not that you're getting a lot of sun. Maybe not of the sunburn, but of the sun. But hopefully, with a little bit of aloe, you do better there, Nervo. Warden, hello, Dave. Sorry I'm late. Welcome in, Warden. Better late than never. Hope you're doing well today. Jason, let us all melt them all up or down where it applies. That's the other part to this as well. Just kind of looking at how you obtain some of these like standard charms, or we were calling them core with a C, like C-O-R, core charms. But that's maybe a little bit too close to spore charms. So I think I'm calling them like the standard charms now. That's maybe the other half of this as well, kind of where you obtain them, how much they cost. YX asking, what about Archduke, Viceroy, Elder Sage, etc.? Yeah, these are, so if I can kind of run through this is where things basically unlock. And so you hit the mountain, you get access to charms at Journeyman, and there is the basic power and the basic luck. When you kind of hit Grandmaster, again, disclaimer at the bottom here, this is sort of where we've got everything right now, where we think we're pretty happy with it. But we want to, see what players think as well, what sentiments, impressions arise. You hit that Grandmaster rank, and now the charm shops start stocking power, or super power, super luck, lucky power. I've got a colon in there for some reason. Let me take that out maybe, if I can find it. I was playing around with the formatting a few times here. Let me take out the colon there, just to be a little less confusing. There we go. Super power, super luck, and the lucky power make their appearance. You get to Lord Lady. Now the charm shops in those areas start stocking the super lucky power charm. You get to Baron, Baroness, and from there on forward, the shop starts stocking extreme power, extreme luck. Some exceptions there, the Cavern, Labyrinth, Folklore Forest. They have spores instead. They're kind of their version of those extreme charms. And that's also where the costs are going to start to incorporate area-specific resources. So kind of when you hit that extreme tier, it's kind of something, hey, what am I supposed to do with all this stuff that I don't have another use for? Maybe I'm done the area, I'm ready to move on, and I just want to kind of cash out the loose change. You can load up on some extreme charms, and then you hit that Grand Duke, and that's where the extreme lucky power, ultimate luck charms start being sold in the charm shop. As well. So kind of this is where we've roughly, or we've got it right now anyway, so again, subject to change, where those tiers of charms start unlocking. So it says these ranks are just for the charm shop, right? Yes. So no restriction. At least right now, we don't have any plans of adding any arm requirements on the charms. These are where the shops basically begin to sell those. And similar to what we did with the Trapsmith and the charm shop, as you get up there in the ranks, the lower tier charms are removed from the shop. Odds are, if you're in the floating islands, you probably don't want that power charm. You probably not. If you really do, go on down to the mountain, buy as many as you want, travel back. But for the most part, just to kind of keep the shops a little more concise, the general direction there is, generally speaking, when you load up the charm shop, there'll be stuff that'll probably interest you. That's kind of the guiding direction for some of the decisions anyway. Alex, is this access to buying and selling charms, nothing related to use? Yes, so that's kind of good to clarify. Not arm requirements, these are purchase, just where the charm shops begins to sell some of these tiers of charms. John, hey, good eve, Dave. You came late, sending love from the Philippines. What can we use to buy those ultimate luck? We'll get into that. I think that's the other half of this as well. And we'll switch over to a slide. I'll do a little bit of a demo there as well. Again, I shouldn't call it a demo. A little bit of a proof of concept to share. There we go. It's a proof of concept to share to get hunters' feedback, impressions, sentiment. We want to see, does it raise any red flags? Does anyone have any kind of poignant feedback that like, okay, you know what? Actually, no, never mind. That's not a good idea. Wax, what about the ultimate charm? We add it to the charm shop with some requirements. Those are a little more special. That's outside the realm of what I'm going to call standard charms. So power, luck, super luck, or lucky power, rather. Luck, power, lucky power. Those kind of identity, that family of charm. And then the supers, the extremes, and the ultimates. So that's kind of what we're adding to the shops. So those kind of fall outside the realm of that. Those would be more tied to the reward structure of a specific area. Maybe a mouse drops it, or you have to go out of your way to craft them in some special way. Swift, has anyone ever purchased Ultimate Bait Keeps with Nacho? Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. But, it was a good lesson in showing when you, because that's roughly set. Okay, if I went out and I got a bunch of Nacho, how long would it take me versus going and getting like 3 eye essence in the Living Garden? And it's roughly equivalent. The Nacho is slightly slower, so that the Living Garden was still kind of has that identity around those ultimate charms. But it just goes to show when you show it all as an upfront sort of cost or requirement, it feels a lot more daunting than that sort of like tiers. And you're slowly working your way up this ladder, this pyramid, if you will. And it seems like a more varied journey along the way. Alex, you'd love a way to sell off lower tier charms that already exist. You can go to the charm shop and refund them for gold. Nathan, you like the way events have ways to roll charms up to higher tiers. Excited to see this expanded. Yeah, and that's where a lot of the inspiration came from, where those event charms and kind of have one tier lend itself to the next one. This won't be a perfect, regulars into supers, supers into extremes, extremes into ultimates. That said, we do have extremes into ultimates. Just because part of the charm shop as well is about gold. So we kind of waited to introduce that a little later in the upgrade path. Versus, your snowball charms, spooky charms, those are things that you obtain from gameplay. So they already have sort of a time and effort gate on them, and that's why you can kind of roll them up, exchange them. Whereas these standard charms are meant to be more, hey, help yourself. Load up on as many as you want, and it isn't until the stats get really up there that they start to have some more requirements where you have to spend some time to earn them rather than purchasing them straight or outright with gold. Swift, there's a gap between extremes and ultimates. That's another thing I will switch over very shortly here as well. We're adjusting these stats of a lot of the charms, kind of narrow some gaps a little bit. That said, it still looks like an exponential curve. Like as you go up the tiers, they get better and better, a lot better and a lot better and a lot better. But we're, especially those lower tier charms, giving them, I'd say a significant stat increase actually, so that you actually notice the effect they have. Like that original power charm, if you're in the mountain and you buy that thing, it basically doesn't really help you catch any mice. You're just throwing away gold every single hunt for maybe a fraction of a % increase. So we want to make that a little bit more noticeable. So if I'm going to spend some gold and get this charm, I want it to actually help me catch mice. Imagine that. Aaron, you like ultimates are coming to shops because supers are a tad underpowered for Archduke Viceroy. It's good to hear, Aaron. That was kind of, that was the impression we got as well. And that's sort of the design direction of this update is to, put those stats a little bit more in line. And hey, when you view that charm shop, there's going to be charms that probably interest you based on the title requirement of the area you're in. You're going to use Spores and Chrome's Rift charms instead. Absolutely. We're slowly kind of, we're phasing out or moving away from charms that have area-specific effects and let kind of resources in the heads-up display, things like bottled wind, lantern oil, that sort of thing, help you go through the areas and it would be a resource to manage there. And then your charm slot's free to help you catch mice. And then it's kind of nice. Charms you earn in one area might prove useful in the next area versus kind of, well, are you done with the iceberg? Throw away all your sticky and wax charms because you're not going to need them in the next area sort of thing. Chris, will the new approach to charms include any form of being able to upcycle these charms? All right, that's kind of maybe a great segue into the other half of this thing. And that's stat tweaks and upgrading charms. So please take this to heart right here. Right. Oh, I'm having double. Oh, the backwards camera. This right here. Development in progress shared for feedback purposes. This is not a demo. Everything is subject to change. It's a proof of concept. Kind of, we got things where we think we're likely happy with it, but we're playtesting it, and that very well may change. And so you can kind of see an example here I took from Mousy Pichu, where as soon as you get to the extreme tier, they begin to cost area-specific resources. So unlike the supers and those kind of regular charms, you can't just buy as many as you want based on how much gold you want to spend. Now it's kind of a cash out if you have excess supplies somewhere. And every area is a little bit different. So when you're in that area, if you have too much of something, extreme charms start to become a thing that you can load up on. You can kind of cash out. If I'm all done, I don't need this stuff anymore. Give me some extremes, please. And then the extremes can be upgraded into ultimates. And again, work in progress here. Right now we've got it set at 4 extremes by an ultimate. And you can kind of see that rolling up or that upgrading mechanic, kind of a lot of inspiration from how snowball charms work, how spooky charms work, party charms, all those event charms, kind of bringing that to these standard non-event charms. Swift, are Rift versions included? That's something we're still tinkering with, and we may or may not include the Rift aspect of this in kind of version 1. We might kind of wait to get this out, get feedback, and then we might use that feedback to kind of make some final decisions on what to do with Rift. That said, we are tinkering. We're experimenting with the Rift as well. Turkey, you feel like if the ultimate tier becomes a base charm, previously used base charms like Ancients get phased out? Well, and certainly that's why they still have some sort of extra resource costs. So, hopefully if this lands in a good spot, it isn't sort of you have unlimited ultimate power charms, because if you have unlimited of those, it's not a very interesting resource to manage, right? So that certainly isn't the intention, to kind of have those be the new burner charm where you just have those on 24/7, because they certainly pack a wallop. Aaron says extreme lucky powers. Indeed, kind of, it's a little bit counter to maybe what we're doing here, but it makes sense. Fill in the gaps. New super and extreme lucky power charms. So just those were kind of missing in this set, and it definitely kind of felt like, something was missing there. So, that said, I know we're not trying to add more charms too often here, but in terms of the set there, those were 2 tiers that were missing that just kind of helped this thing work. Yeah, upcycling has some. Yeah, so as you upgrade them, and again, I kind of grabbed an example from MouseHunt, and please, grain of salt. This may be subject to change as we playtest, and really the objective here of sharing it is to get impressions, sentiment. See if any red flags come up in players' minds to help us make some final decisions here. And you can see, hey, the extreme charm, I have to spend dragon scales and minerals to get extreme powers, and then I can upgrade those into ultimate power charms. So sort of indirectly, an ultimate power charm costs 12 dragon scales and 8 minerals right now, plus some gold. Let's put myself doing math on the spot here. Subra, 8 luck is great, but the price is somewhat heavy in my opinion. All right. And you can see some stat increases as well in a couple of the charms. I don't think the extremes are sitting at 8. I'm pretty sure there's 7 right now, if I recall correctly. That's sort of where we want them to land, though, where they just feel a little pricey without being completely, hey, too expensive, can't use. Because that tier of charm really should be something that you save for when you need it, right? Like you're going up, you're hunting a really difficult mouse. That's when you start pulling out the heavy hitters. And so, the intention is to try to hopefully get these landing in a place where they don't become a burner charm. This is just 24/7. I'm just always rocking extreme lucky power charms. They're more, okay, I don't really need the best in slot charm, but I also want a little bit of help. And, a little bit till too, we've got these sort of what we call the standard charms. Ancient charms, spore charms. Those are sort of the 3 families of charm, if I can use that as a word or as a way to describe them, that we're really honed in on, where you're going to be using these standard charms, ones that are called power, luck, or lucky power. You're going to be using ancient charms and using spore charms. Those are sort of the bread and butter that you go to when you're just looking to improve your catch rate, and trying to find a good identity for them all, where these standard charms come from charm shops. They're plentiful, but then they start to involve area resources. So, unless you've been in MouseHunt for a long time, odds are you're not going to sit there farming these extreme luck charms. It's more a cash out when you're kind of like, well, I'm ready to move on. What can I get? Because there's ancient charms as well. If you do maps, you can get comparable, ancient charms have comparable stats. So if you do a lot of maps, you kind of, all right, I don't really need those charms for that specific purpose. And then spore charms have the other identity. They're on the marketplace as well. So, subject to supply and demand, there's something you can spend gold on. And help yourself to as many as the marketplace has, basically. Or if you have too many of them, you can sell them to other hunters who are looking to put them to use. And they kind of feed into the best in slot charm eventually as well. Yeah, Jonathan, to add what Alex says, scales for charms don't make sense since we can buy Fireball full of teeth. But I think that's perfectly fine, right? That's up to you to decide where you want to spend those resources. And maybe it might be worthwhile kind of travel around to some of the other areas where there might be a resource. All right, my scales, I want Fireball fuel. Cool, so I'm not going to buy charms. You know, that's no different than how gold works, right? You look in the shop and it's like, you know what? I don't want to spend my gold on that. I want to spend my gold on this. You know, that's how currency works, right? But then there'll be other areas where you can get an extreme luck charm. It isn't like MouseHunt is the only charm shop in the entire game that sells them. So that might be worthwhile to take a little bit of a travel around. Oh, why isn't this working? Uh-oh. Hey, well, all right. The mobile version isn't working. Hey, now it's working. Great. It's going to start on mobile where it's a little bit aligned differently here. So where can we start? MouseHunt, forgive the formatting here. The mobile app's really not meant to run in a web browser. MouseHunt is a pretty good example, actually. So you get up to Grand Duke. Uh-oh, these aren't in the right order. Let's go to Floating Islands, actually. Let's go to the Floating Islands. All right, we gotta stick to the browser. Mobile's not playing nice with me here. Catching a bunch of mice. So you can kind of see, okay, I want to say, you know, I don't want to spend mouse scales on my extreme luck charms, but maybe you have a lot of sky ore and sky glass and you don't need bottled wind. Hey, I can get extreme luck charms. That said, they have to be just enough because they do overlap, right? When you look at this 8 luck bonus, and actually the Floating Islands is a good example here. Extreme Lucks also have 8 luck, plus some power. They're, you know, arguably a better charm as well. So if you do a lot of maps, you might be using those. And so these being just expensive enough where, you know, it only makes sense if you don't have Ancients and you don't have Spores. And it's kind of that cash out for if you have too much of something. Yep, Jonathan, with Fireball Fuel being tradable, scales effectively adds gold cost. And that is your choice to make, right? Basically, if you don't see it as worthwhile, don't buy them with mouse scales, buy it with Fireball Fuel, and then, you know, it depends on like what you're looking to get out of it. Yeah, with the Ultimate Ancient Charms being as plentiful as they are from maps, making the lower tier charms too expensive doesn't make sense for us to buy them. And Jonathan, I think that's the takeaway. Not so much us, it doesn't make sense for you to buy it. And that, you know, it really comes down to what resources you have in your inventory. Because there's these 3 different families of charms, right? And so, you know, if you do a whole lot of maps and you have a bunch of Ultimate Ancients, these will just never interest you, right? They're basically not for you. And therefore, somebody who doesn't do a lot of maps and you're looking to, okay, I need another source of charms available. And kind of that's the end result, or the end goal we're looking to achieve. Different players make different choices, but it's the right choice for them. So there isn't just, you know, because otherwise we have these 3 families of charms. And if, you know, these are too good and too plentiful, then you have the opposite problem. What am I supposed to do with all my Ancients? They're gone now. Yep, Super, the purpose of these charms is for cashing out excess materials, not for doing first progression of the area. I would think so, but if you kind of think about the flow you might have, you might finish up an area, have too much of something, sink it away into these charms, bring that stash of charms forward with you to the next area, put them to use there. Or similarly, you might be getting, say, the Extreme Luck Charm. You might be loading up on that with no intention of actually arming it, because maybe you just want them to buy the Extreme Lucky Powers. Or maybe you're just buying the Extreme so that you can go down and buy the Extreme or the Ultimate Luck Charm. And so in some ways, when you're buying that, you know, the lower tier of charm as a high level player, it might not be to actually arm it on your trap. You might be using it as part of the upgrade flow, similar to snowball charms. You know, kind of depending on what you're doing. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm not actually going to arm the snowball charm, but I want to upgrade it into an extreme or an ultimate, and that's when I want to actually arm it. So kind of a similar flow going there as the event charms have. Arctic, will there be a King's giveaway this year at all? Unfortunately, I don't believe so. So we're stretched a little too thin in terms of devs, and we just don't have anyone available who would be able to put it together. Now, Sean, rather than 8 luck charm, 15 luck charm would be even better. 17 or more, 25. Yeah. See, I'm wondering at that stage of the game, whether, again, it might come down to it's not a charm you're looking to actually arm, but it more becomes something you buy to then upgrade it into the ultimate tier. So what about the rift areas? I think we won't quite put our toes into that pond quite yet. We're still kind of tinkering with what to do with the rifts. And it may or may not really make it into kind of the update that's going to apply this. Yeah, and Alex, that means we'll have to buy from a different area. Exactly. When it comes to the extreme tiers, they all cost different things based on where you are. And so it is kind of that cash out. And often, hey, players have asked for, what am I supposed to do with all this stuff when I'm done the area? And there is something to sink it into. You can sink it now into extreme charms. And if those aren't good enough for you, then you can upgrade the extremes into ultimates. That said, we have left out the Ultimate Lucky Power Charm. We're kind of planning to that for a follow-up release as well. So kind of this initial batch, I don't think we're going to see the ability to upgrade the Ultimate Power and Ultimate Luck into the Ultimate Lucky Power Charm. Which then you can use with the Halloween potions to turn into a Rift Ultimate Lucky Power Charm. So there's a lot of upgrade potential, basically, this path to go on to find that tier that's going to work best for what mouse you're hunting and just how big of a stat increase you're looking. Turkey, a bit of a sidetrack, kind of been saying that 15 years into a browser game, the devs are still doing weekly feedback sessions. They say, hey, it's our pleasure, and honestly, just pleasure seeing people playing the game 15 years into it as well. We often reminisce. We never would have thought it would go for 15 years, and just often so many areas we're kind of thinking like, this is probably going to be one of the final areas in the game, right before you beat MouseHunt. And I think that kind of mental shift happened of like, well, I don't think that's maybe ever going to be the case. Well, I assume one day it will be the case, but we basically don't plan areas around that being the case. Yeah, Jonathan's seen a bit of a buff to ancient charms. Yeah, and a few charms have gotten their stats adjusted slightly just to massage everything just a little bit, especially some of the lower tier charms. If I can kind of go one slide back here, where was I? So you can kind of see the first point here, increasing stats to be more akin to arming a second base. And that's to try to have a more noticeable effect on the catch rate, especially when you're first starting out with charms. That very first power charm that you get in the mountain, if you buy that thing, it basically does next to nothing to help you catch mice. It is such a tiny little stat boost, but you're spending quite a bit of your gold, especially for a journeyman. That's a lot of gold to be spending on something that gets consumed every time you sound the horn. And so a lot of the charms have just been brought up just a little bit, especially on the lower tiers, a bit more of a dramatic effect. I don't know where, let's maybe zip around a little bit to see where we can see a different change. Maybe a Grandmaster location. Let's try out the training grounds. You see the power charms brought up to 500 power, 5% power bonus, and kind of like, somebody who might actually arm a power charm on their trap. That's kind of like arming a second base for you. So it should feel like a more noticeable upgrade, but something you have to spend gold on every time you hunt to keep it going. Wax Dave, can the rainbow charm be crafted with spore charms to get rainbow spore charms? No, the rainbow is upgraded from ancients. So you need ancients to make the rainbows. And eventually we want to kind of connect all the dots. So you upgrade your ancients all the way to rainbows. You upgrade your spores all the way to ultimate spores. You combine them into the rainbow spore. You can make it into a rift rainbow spore. And that is just about the very best charm you're going to find. So that'll kind of create a nice economy around those two families of charms. They'll have that special relationship. And then this third family of charms, the standard charms that you get in charm shops, they're a little bit more one-off. They're going to be ones that you probably don't use quite as much, but they're still, there if you're getting low on something else. That said, if you do a lot of maps and you load up on spore charms from the marketplace, then this family of charm is probably not one you're going to use, but a different type of hunter might be using this. You don't do a lot of maps. that kind of gates away the whole rainbow spore family of charm. So the ultimate luck, ultimate power charmer is going to be one of your big heavy hitters that you have access to. But different charms for different types of hunters who have different hunting styles. With a 250% power bonus, you might, the Ember Charm's pretty close to that there, Rashawn. So if you go to the marketplace, you can definitely get a charm with a huge power bonus on it as well. Jonathan, will the festive varieties go away or be convertible back to non-festive versions? Right now, we've brought them in line with where they're at, but that does make some conversion stuff a little bit awkward, certainly. But no kind of concrete decisions there. So obviously the stats will match the Festive Ultimate Luck Charm, should match the Ultimate Luck Charm. But in terms of kind of how you can trade and exchange them, no concrete decisions quite yet. I know during Halloween there are some potions that'll help you sort of convert them and upgrade them a little bit though. Nathan would love a non-rift charm somewhere to fill the gap between Rainbow and 20 luck charms. Yeah, and fair enough. And there's a bit of that exponential curve, though. And that's quite intentional because as you progress, you sort of need larger stat bonuses for things just to make sense. It's time to sound my horn. And that's even a bit of a refresh in direction we have to go with trap stats. Even as we work on the next area, the stat jump when you upgrade your trap is starting to go up more. And you may notice that with the floating islands. Some of those tier 2 floating islands traps, they take a big step forward in stats. And that's so that you can actually notice the difference they make. Whereas as the years gone by, before an upgrade would be like, well, I added 1 luck. I added 500 power. And in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter, right? You don't really notice it. It's such a tiny little stat increase. Like, don't get me wrong, hey, better is better. But we kind of want to create a little bit more noticeable of stat increases so that each has a stronger identity. And there's a little bit more practical application. I'm going to be using this one while I earn the next one versus skip all of these, go straight to the very best one. Because something that's almost the best will just carry you all the way through there, and just add a little bit more value to making those incremental upgrades. So kind of same, that's for traps, apply that to charms. They kind of go up exponentially so that your opponents, the mice that you're expected to be using that tier of charm against, they're also getting exponentially stronger. So you can kind of keep pace with them, and eventually you sort of have to make that upgrade to be able to continue on going, or eventually you're just not powerful enough to move on to the next area. Swift, what about combining them all, eh? No, we're trying to, simplify things a little bit as best we can, without stepping on some of the existing strong identity charms. So, we're again kind of tinkering with it, and I use that term, family of charm. There's that standard charms that are going to be in the charm shops like this. There's the ancient charms, and they come from maps. There's the spore charms that come from specific areas, and they're tradable. That's a big part of their identity. And then there's that family of charm that is the event charm, and they kind of have their own little niche as well. You earn them during an event. They're a reward from doing the event. They might save you from having to use some of your other charms, and they have that passive roll-up ability as well. So everything kind of hopefully has its own place. And, the goal is so when you think about a specific charm, you can at least somewhat remember, hey, where does it come from? How good is it? When should I use it? Whereas if you start to have too many, it starts to get a little harder to follow. Elam, can you trade in hundreds of those Power Ranger action figures for charm in the shop? And fair enough. I think maybe that's feedback now we took to heart. The joke didn't quite land. They were meant to be kind of the cheap knockoff toys that are mass produced, and that's why you get thousands of them. But I think that maybe didn't rub too many players the right way, or they didn't quite get the joke, and they're like, what do I do with all these things? But it's meant to be humorous. But, I guess humor is in the eye of the beholder, or it's subjective. So I don't think that joke landed too well with too many players. But so just know you have thousands of those action figures. That was meant to be a bit of a humorous joke, but I don't think we got too many chuckles out of players. So, lesson learned. Yeah, Edison superpower charms are useful when you're new to Rift areas. Yeah, if you don't have any kind of charms to fulfill that Rift set bonus. Analysis, any plans to bring back egg cartons? No. The feedback on that was very mixed. They didn't go over well, and they had a lot of technical problems as well. So the implementation of them wasn't great from a technical standpoint as well as a gameplay standpoint. We had kind of a lot of complaints around them, so no plans to bring those back. But it shows the polarizing nature of feedback. Aaron saying egg cartons were great. Now, we do kind of have kicking in the idea bank. Hopefully, we can leverage the scavenger map system to put together, that would be a good fit for the egg hunt. We're again stretched a little thin in terms of just devs who can put together the design work involved. Because, it's easy to say, hey, let's have scavenger maps for eggs. But somebody has to sit down and curate different difficulties for all players at all stages of the game, put together appropriate lists, play test them, balance them, come up with rewards as well. Maps generally need rewards for standard and dusted tier of rewards. So it's kind of, I use this expression sometimes, ideas are easy, execution is hard, because that's where a lot of the time and the effort goes into actually put together all the details, right? Where all that detail-oriented work come into place. But it is a great idea. It's just we kind of don't have a designer for you who could put it together right now. But it's chilling out in the idea bank, and hopefully, who knows, maybe next year we'll have those extra cycles to do the design work. Super, you think the tier 2 trap stats were mostly due to covering the prestige luck base bug, though, eh? Oh, no, that didn't really play into the factor in that decision. Just looking to make bigger sort of steps. Even something we've been tinkering in the background is trying to categorize traps into either categories or tiers of equipment and get those jumps to feel a little bit more significant. So maybe there's more value in earning a trap from an area because you're going to use it at the next area to be able to capture the mice to earn the next trap versus, I've got this trap that I got 7 years ago and it's just good enough until I find whatever the current best trap is, while still allowing a little bit, you don't have to go through everything in a linear order. There's still some agency. You can choose based on what other equipment. Maybe you have a really good base that's going to compensate for not having the best trap of a certain power type. Or maybe you're going to compensate with charms for a month or so to try to earn that trap. It's like, all right, cool. I feel good about that decision. Still have some agency in the player's hands, of course. Ash, have you toyed with the idea of 2 charm slots? It comes up every now and then, but absolutely no plans to let you arm 2 charms. Never say never, but I think the ship has long sailed. There's just kind of too much complexity in the charms where it would have to be from the get-go. You'd almost need a fresh slate. We'd have to delete every single charm that started in the game and start from scratch with the assumption like you can arm 2 of these things. There's just too many kind of overly lethal combinations that make other things in the game irrelevant if you could arm 2 charms at the same time. So, at least as far as I know, there is zero plan to ever even consider that as a possibility. But who knows what the future will hold? I've certainly been proven wrong in the past. So you never know. Just the right idea comes around and it ends up working well. Nulsis also loved the egg cartons. I think maybe the idea of the egg cartons was good, just kind of the execution of them could be a little bit stronger. So we'll see. I mean, the spring egg hunt is just around the corner, but alas, there's no egg maps in the mix for this year. Yeah, schoolwork, some feedback for the proposed costs. The gold costs make the conversions feel a little pointless. It's cheaper to buy the charms on the marketplace. I'd assume you're comparing them to maybe spore charms. Like these charms, unless I'm sorely mistaken, they're not available on the marketplace. So they would compete with the marketplace value of primarily spore charms. They're probably the closest thing that have comparable stats. And I think that's okay as well. These are kind of, in some ways, act as an anchor price where if those spore charms ever become too expensive, then these become a more viable or more attractive option, and that kind of anchors the price of spore charms a little bit as well. So some of it is economic mechanic as well as it is actual, upgrading the charms to use them and arm them. John, quick question. Most of your MouseHunt friends are sages getting close to Fable. Are you planning progression or stay at 0? No plans in the immediate future. I mean, it's the nature of it, right? I think any RPG style game, if we can call it massive passive RPG is what we like to call MouseHunt, it's natural. You're going to need a kind of level cap because there are only a few developers and there are tens of thousands of players. So it's only natural that the players can put in a lot more time than developers when you combine. Tens of thousands of players can put in a lot more time than just 10 or 12 developers can. So it's just natural that players are going to be playing the game quicker than we can develop it, and that's just the reality of resources and time constraints, right? So we kind of need that title cap, and it'll come at a time where if we should catch up to that point where there's content for that title, we could potentially lift the cap. But I hope we get there. I will be a very happy person should we get to that day, but it seems very far away, at least at the moment. Ilum, since you're using Prestige base most of the time, you're only using Rift Charm for the power bonus. Lots of regular charms are just sitting there now, unless I can convert them using a Rift Potion. Yeah, and eventually kind of that's what we want to tie in as well, where you could kind of riftify some of your potion charms as well, but it provides kind of, value. There's always sort of things to sink things into. You might get some extreme charms from an area. Maybe, you want to use your Sky Ore and Glass to get some charms, and then kind of a way they're going to feed into the Rift ecosystem eventually, but we're kind of taking baby steps as well. I'm sure we'll get lots of great impressions, sentiments, and feedback. Just kind of sharing this on Feedback Friday. I am sure we'll get 1,000 times more feedback once it's live in the game. And so we're aware of that. And so we almost want to put it into the game before we move on to that next step, because I think we'll make better decisions that are closer to what players want to see as well. Galen, are we getting rid of the small power charm from the mountain? You know what? Let's go check it out. I forget what we landed on there. I know we did increase the health of the boulder a little bit. And long term, the mountain does need an overhaul. It just didn't quite work out. It was a last ditch attempt to try to have gameplay that involves charms, but I think where it misses the mark is it actually does more harm than good. If you are a new player and you hit the mountain, and the mountain's trying to get you to use charms, right? But it's teaching you charms break a boulder, which it should actually be letting you see that charms help you catch mice. So I think it actually does more harm than good, because it sort of distracts from what the actual, when you're done the mountain and you move on to the lab, now it's like, well, charms don't help you break boulders anymore, and they don't do anything to the lab setup. So, but I think it was only dropped by mice, actually. We're pushing the MouseHunt trivia section here. And I don't know if it'll make it into this release, but we're probably going to bid farewell to the Charm Conduit at some point in the game's future. I think once we have time to overhaul or revise the mountain a little bit, because it is coupled to Mustachio greeting you, so there's a little bit of programming to be done. But realistically now, when you start the game, there's events, there's the marketplace, there is lots of way to get charms without a conduit, and it was just, an idea from 12 years ago that just never really got off the ground, and it is too late for it now. Whereas originally we wanted wood, stone, marble, golden charm conduits that would do something, but the ship has sailed on that. The ship has long since sailed on that. Jonathan, you don't mind that some charms alter mouse populations, such as soft serve charms at the slushy shoreline, scholar charms, etc., and so on. Yeah, I could, and there's no immediate plans to do away with that, but, I think if we could redo the iceberg, we would just make that a different type of cheese, right? Then cheese is what mice you attract, and the charm helps you catch the mice. That said, I think there's room for some outliers there. Anytime then, if you need a charm to attract a specific mouse, I feel like it just needs to be done with more purpose and intent. Like, well, I'm essentially sort of making you weaker against this mouse because you're not allowed to use a charm, basically. And it's done in a more thematic way than just the game saying, the charm just won't work against this mouse. If you need the charm to encounter the mouse, it just, by extension, removes the ability to use a charm on that mouse. And Subra, that's a fair comparison. Wild Tonic, Mana, Bottled Wind, that kind of in a way is that second charm slot, but it's that slot for an area specific effect. And I mean, I don't know, who knows if we needed more sort of things going on, we could add more resources, but also careful not to overcomplicate things. Jonathan says, bring back Mustachio. He's still there. You could definitely benefit from being at the forefront. And Jacob's been doing some work. I think if you watch Feedback Friday, last week he was working on some characters as well. I know that's kind of something we would like to get into the game, is just more characters, especially like shopkeepers. That's a good opportunity to introduce some characters. It'd be great if you just saw Mustachio hanging out in the charm shop on the mountain and it'd feel a little less lonely, bring things to life a little bit more. Yeah, Swift, while reducing area-specific charms is nice, you hope it doesn't go too far to reduce charms to only stat bonuses. Maybe you could just elaborate on kind of why. I know there's some nostalgia there as well. I have similar, those similar feelings of, just remembering, using a certain charm. And I think there'd be some that have a strong identity. I don't see them going anywhere, but I mean, I don't never say never, but like the Shattering charm has a pretty strong identity there. YX asking, will we see a charm with more than 30 luck? Currently, that's the ultimate party charm. I mean, I don't know. No immediate plans, but who knows? We'll have to kind of pace it as the areas and the mice get stronger. Typically, you want the hunter also getting stronger alongside those mice. So eventually, it will come. You share any update for the polluted charm and its variant? We've kind of left those alone for now. I think that was maybe... Over the years, there's maybe some, I wouldn't call them failed attempts, but they didn't quite hit the mark like we were hoping they would. And, we did want polluted to be like this important type of equipment in the game. And it didn't track. And, the inspiration was the toxic spill was an area that was available all the way up to Archduke at a time that made it technically the highest title requirement in the game. And so we wanted it to have some very impactful equipment that you would use throughout very many other areas. But, obviously that didn't pan out quite well. So I think those would be something we'd want to phase out, move away from, at least not really make them all that important. And, now we're kind of focused on, like I said earlier, these 3 families of charms. Fail to catch Carmine. I should be using a better charm. That's what I'm learning. There's the standard charms from the shops, there's ancient charms from maps, and there's spore charms that kind of come from the marketplace, or you can earn them, but they're a little bit more limited where they come from, but they're kind of more of a marketplace charm. Ancient charms are a map charm, and these standard charms are more of a shop charm. There's unlimited supply of them, until you get to the extreme tier at least. Yeah, Warren, Shattering Charms just called. You want me to put them through to you, Dave? Yeah, that's what I mean. If there's something with very specific intent and a strong identity there, that's great. But I don't know. The soft serve charm, maybe there's some nostalgia. It's a cute looking charm as well. It's got that going for it. But really, it just kind of takes up the charm slot, right? Like, I don't know how interesting that is. It could just be soft serve cheese, couldn't it? Right? Like, it would facilitate, everything would work the exact same way, but you're free now to use a charm to help you catch mice. But it is awfully adorable, so there's some attachment there as well. Arctic, is there a way to force bottled wind to stay on? All these island changes make me forget to turn it back on. Yeah, I guess one retreating and what have you, but at least in the short term, it's something we've been experimenting with. Floating Islands was a bit of an experiment. Folklore Forest has been an extension of that. Like the trap library in Folklore Forest, or in Floating Islands. And when you go to publish a book, having your bait change automatically, etc. That's a little bit of an experiment there as well. And we're trying to learn the best technical approach, the best UI approach, the best kind of what player perceptions are there. And it's maybe a little bit blue sky because it would be a whole lot of work, but kind of applying that to more areas. So we'll see. I think we're still just kind of learning the best way to do that. But it would be nice, without overcomplicating things, just have a little bit more agency of what happens when. Maybe you can just automate a few things when this condition is met. You want something to happen, but also as we add more moving parts, there's more moving parts to maintain. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And Swift growth charms and soil base also left behind in the dust. And, I think maybe if you can empathize where we're coming from as well, that's why we want to kind of do away with that area-specific charm stuff, because time and time again, there you go. You got the wild growth charm, polluted charms, right? Like, you could probably find a lot of examples of this. It was an attempt to make them sort of interesting and relevant, but as time goes by, they just cease being relevant, right? And I think the takeaway there is, hey, stop trying to do that. It's not going to happen. And just focus in on what is working. So hopefully if that makes sense, that's kind of an example of why these area specific charms might feel good at the time, but then they very quickly become clutter that you just never have to interact with ever again. And so we kind of would rather want, let's just say, you're earning the same charm in different ways in different areas, so that, I can remember what these all are, where they all come from. And else you like the charms that have effects sometimes add some flavor, let you make choices. But I think we found other ways to accomplish that. But granted, I don't think it's any sort of rule that shall never be broken. Is a charm that might do a certain thing at a special time, and save those for very epic feeling moments. Zuriel comes to mind. The Shattering Charm with the big three. An opportunity to add a little flavor, a little bit of role playing, make you feel like you're doing something special. You made a very special piece of equipment that you're going to put to use. Soft serve cheese like some cheese whiz, eh? Just kind of lift that up. That Michael, that kind of puts a little cute thought in the head as well. I don't know. Look, the time is flying by. Holy smokes, how did 50 minutes go? I feel like I blinked and it went by. Where else could we find? Let me see here. Lord Lady. Let's go to Varmint Valley. Let's go to Fort Rocks. Is mobile going to play nice? Let's see. Mobile's not playing nice. Oh, we can take a look at the Fort Rocks Charm Shop as well. I didn't do too good of a job of just scrolling through a few different shops. But you can kind of see from here, Fort Rocks is Lord Lady, right? So the Super Lucky gets introduced there. And you got some extreme tiers as well. And, here's another good example of something you might end up with too much of, especially if you're ready to move on to the area and you're not planning on coming back. You can sort of cash out that way. Knowing the extremes, you can then take them somewhere else and turn them into ultimate power charms. So again, there's when it comes to the extreme tier for these standard charms, there's a little bit of agency and autonomy in that not every area is going to make sense. Like Jonathan was saying earlier in chat, I'm not spending mouse scales on these charms. Cool, and that's okay, right? But maybe you don't care as much about the meteorite pieces, and okay, cool, I'll sink these into there. That kind of indirectly at the moment, with just again, subject to change up there, puts the cost of an ultimate power charm at 400 meteorite pieces. And Nathan, you like how area charms make you choose between a better catch rate versus getting the area effect. And that's fair enough, but it needs to be a meaningful choice. Again, the Shattering Charm, I think that's narrative, which is fun. But you don't have a choice there, right? It's like you have to arm it, right? Like you can't encounter the big three without that charm equipped. So that's the catch rate against that mouse. But there's room there. It might shift as you come back to an area later in the game, and depending on how it's set up, maybe I don't need the soft serve charm anymore. But then that needs to be paired with a cheese that's going to bring stronger mice. It's like, I'm ready for the stronger mice. Bring them on. Whereas when you first start the area, maybe you're not ready for that. So there's room to have fun with that for sure. I'm not saying it'll be gone and shall never ever happen again. But there's choices between, well, what charm do you want to equip, right? I mean, that's kind of the same thing. Do you want a better catch rate, but you're going to burn more resources? Or do you want a lower catch rate and not spend as many resources? So there's still that choice, the exact same choice to be made, but there's even more. It's more depth to it. It's a wider choice. What tier of charm do you go with? What are you comfortable with burning right now to get back in exchange something else? So it's a little more nuanced choice as well. Yeah, Ash, it's a rock and a hard place. You appreciate charms that make small changes like the soft serve charm, but you hate having 10,000 charms in your inventory that you'll never use. And if I think about the identity of the soft serve, and we're focusing in on that one, I guess, it's a way to take some resources that you earned and kind of have a burst of progression. So, there's definitely room to do that with a charm still as well. And just maybe tying in with the loop where maybe you're going to hunt some difficult mice that drop something that you can get an area specific charm to then have a burst of progress against as well. So there's plenty of room to happen as well. Yeah, schoolwork. It's not sport charms that make the new shop charms under overpriced. It's the ultimate snowball and spooky. Yeah, and maybe that might be feedback as well. They might be a little too plentiful in some spots, so that might need a little bit of tuning as well. At least those are kind of temporary, right? They're sort of subject to the winds of supply and demand. Whereas these ones we got to be a little bit more conservative with because they're very permanent. They're always there. They're always accessible. It isn't like for 1 month. If you're very active right now, you can get a lot of really cool charms and then they go away. These ones are just, they're always there if you need them. And so I think that kind of fits the identity. They're always going to be priced a little bit more conservatively when it comes to that. There's quite a jump between the supers and the extremes, eh? I don't mean doubles in terms of gold, but you do need that area-specific resource here if we're looking at the example we've got up here. Swift, do you think for new players it's even harder to justify using precious area resources on a single-use charms? Yeah, and I don't think this is the... these charms aren't really, that's not the target audience for them. They're going to be using, if you do maps, Ancients might be your bread and butter. You can always go to the marketplace and get some sport charms or, hey, snowball charms. If you might have those left over from an event. That's good. When you're all done with the area, right, and you don't know what to do with this stuff, you can at least get something for it and bring that to the next area. So maybe at Fort Rocks, you're not collecting meteorite pieces to buy extreme power charms to hunt in Fort Rocks. But you might have a few thousand when you're done Fort Rocks to get some charms and bring it forward to the next area. Mudkip just joined. Can we swap bigger quantity of lesser charm and exchange them to a stronger one, like the ultimate power, ultimate luck for ultimate lucky power? We do kind of want to go there eventually, but not quite yet. So we'll go back to the floating islands here. If I can go to the right region, that'll help me. And so we've just stopped at the ultimate tier for now. And so you can kind of see there's a little bit of that going on. The super tier is still just gold, and isn't until you get to the extreme, and that starts kicking in at the later titles, that the additional cost starts showing up. And then, yeah, sure enough, you can combine the two extremes into this version, and you can upgrade your extremes into ultimates. Kind of, similar vibe to what a snowball charm, spooky charms have. So there might be that one unlucky player who immediately buys the charms without building the walls, eh? And that's fair enough. I think when it comes to games, it's okay to be able to make mistakes. Dare I say, it is good. A game is boring if you can't make a mistake. The important thing is when you do make a mistake, you understand what you did wrong and you know what you want to do next time. And that's the difference between something feeling engaging and fun because you can learn how to get better at it versus something being frustrating. If you fail and you don't know why, that usually means it's frustrating. If you fail and you know what you did wrong, you can't wait to try again and do it something different, right? And so that's okay. It's not an instruction manual or not assembling furniture. You should have a bunch of rules presented to you and you decide, what do you want to do? You make choices. How do you want to play? What do you want to do here? So that you're not just going through the motions of just like, yep, I do A to do B to do C. That's like programming your VCR. I'm dating myself. I don't think too many VCRs probably are flying off the shelves these days. Rather than it should be a slightly different journey based on kind of what your personal goals are and what equipment you have available to you. Missowat asks about battery fragments. You don't think it's worth using to craft energy charms? I don't quite want to touch on the Rift. There might be some things that we're still just tuning up a little bit. There's some areas that maybe I don't quite want to give the proof of concept quite yet. YX, can we have a charm to increase the attraction rate of the Terrified Adventure? I don't think so. We do. There's a little idea in the back of our minds of a small Valor Rift update, but anything we do with the Valor Rift, I don't really want to introduce something that's going to make everyone wish they went through it differently. Imagine if you just kind of finished your run where you used a lot of supplies, and then out comes something that's going to make that your outcome completely different. I think that's a little bit of a rake we could step on and the handle's going to hit us in the face. That's it. We have a small idea that wouldn't quite do that. It's more aimed at every time you have an unlucky run, there's something to help you on your next run and just kind of mitigate that a bit. So it would kind of bring the averages closer together, if that makes sense, without really maybe knocking a huge, giant, never before seen high score. I think it would raise the bar, but kind of, anyway. I'm just talking with zero details. I shouldn't even be saying anything. Jonathan, are you looking at the refund amounts as well? So the gold cost ones, that ratio is staying the same. So if you do just have power charms, you have nothing to do with them, sell them back to the shop for a little bit of gold. The ones that cost resources, actually, these ones, that might be worth checking out. Yeah, okay, no, we do currently have it, the same kind of gold ratio. That might be something interesting to get feedback on. Traditionally, if it's something you spend items and gold on, usually you can't sell it back at that point. That does kind of make sky ore and glass have some sort of intrinsic gold value. That said, it's pretty much zero. That's pretty negligible value. 100 ore and glass for 900 gold. I think you'd be better off buying some bottled wind, selling it on the marketplace. Gary Sparks, do you think a safeguard charm could have a dual purpose for a terrified adventure attraction, eh? Yeah, I made it come down to, I don't know off the top of my head, though. I mean, sacrificing your charm slot there, I would think there would just be a right or wrong answer to, does that make sense? And it would have to be a pretty juicy increase in encounter rate, I think, to make up for just forfeiting not only the charm stats, but the, 3-set rift bonus. But anyway, we'd have to kind of workshop that a little bit. That said, I don't think there's any plans to touch the Terrified Adventure. That seems like a very stressful change that would not be very well received at all. Schoolwork, you're seconding Alex's note that the devs are already good at providing resource conversions. 200 meteorite pieces, get 66 crescent and sell that. Yeah, that is fair enough as well. And the marketplace is a variable in it, but we tend not to sit down and come up with numbers as a result of the marketplace because it's the other way around. The numbers are what affect supply and demand, and that the marketplace becomes a result of that. So it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. And inevitably, changing or making something available in a new way causes a change in the marketplace. So if you base the numbers off that, then as soon as it goes live, it's no longer valid anymore, right? So, but again, and some of it provides an anchor as well. So there's kind of that anchoring price where it just, even here, if I'm in Fort Rocks, that's a good example of, no, I moved to the floating islands. Let's go to Fort Rocks again. Here's a good example of the relationship between in-game shops and the marketplace. If I go to the Trapsmith, never mind, it's the general store. Silver bolts. I can sell these for 100,000 gold to the traps or to the general store owner as much as I want. So if you find silver bolts as a loot drop, or if you have 50 Dawn Dust laying around that you don't want to use for anything else, you can sell silver bolts all day long to the store for 100K. That means on the marketplace, they're also, silver bolts are tradable. It just never makes sense to ever buy one for, it anchors the price. So that's kind of a good example of that relationship between the two, right? You're not going to sell a silver bolt on the marketplace for less than 100K because the Trapsmith or the general store owner will give you 100K for that silver bolt. And so kind of, again, that's sort of more in line with not so much pricing it against the marketplace, but it becomes an anchor. It becomes one more variable in a decision, but then ultimately it's the player's decision to decide how they want to spend their resources. And yeah, different things are going to compete for your attention, right? If we go ahead and make this a super lucrative exchange, then you end up with the opposite problem. It's like, well, I would never buy bottled wind, right? So no matter what you do, that's going to be the result. And that's quite intentional. You are going to sit there and you're going to decide, what do I want to spend this resource on? And ultimately, you will decide what is the best thing to spend this resource on. And just because it's newer, we're not going to try to say, okay, well, charms are the new thing. Because then it just has the opposite effect, right? And then you could have the exact same observation like, well, now it doesn't make sense to buy bottled wind. It's an impossible task to have them both important to everyone all at the same time. And so it is just kind of anchoring that a little bit more, setting that baseline. Yeah, Ronald, you like the nostalgia when you're on a map, you get to use a specific charm. Yeah, you have over 1,000 firecracker charms left over from the cruise and no prospect of ever using them. Yeah, and that's, maybe a bit of a tangent. A way to maybe organize your inventory a little bit might be nice as well, where you could kind of put together your collectibles, your personal collection a little bit easier. Jonathan, the marketplace is not always logical when setting prices, eh? And that rings true to real life, right? That's why I say markets are not logical; they're emotional. Yeah, Warden, you often buy charms off the marketplace, sell them back to the charm shop for profit because the marketplace is flooded. So that shows an example, right? There's those opportunities where it sets baselines, it sets anchor prices on it. So again, it affects the marketplace. It's a variable in the whole system. It's not meant to be, well, now this is just what you're supposed to do and everything else is now irrelevant, right? Everything should be relevant in its own way. And as time goes by and goals change and different areas come out, it'll naturally ebb and flow. Something might be in the spotlight for a little bit and then it kind of becomes less important and something else becomes a little bit more important. But it's fluid because it's based on kind of the current goals of tens of thousands of hunters. Now, how did we end up over an hour? I don't understand how this happens. Let's get to the trivia, shall we? It's past noon. Where does the time go? Hopefully I have the answer hidden. Hey, I do. All right. Well, I thought this was an awfully cute trivia question for this week. What was the first ever charm released? We're talking about charms a whole lot. So, hey, if you're in the know here, you've probably picked up on the answer to the question is in the question itself. Hey, that took no time at all. Daniel got the answer awfully quickly. Yes, indeed, it is the first ever charm. It was the first ever charm. Unfortunately, that was the highest resolution version of that image I have. And I even had to expand it a bit, so that's a little blurry. Much of the items from long ago were not painted at very high resolution. I didn't test this link. Let's make sure this works. Hey, it works. All right, I will put this in the chat for your clicking convenience. I better claim it myself. That's a pretty good reward. I'll take it. Chong even looking up the exact date. That was January 12. Okay, I thought it was January 11 for some reason. January 12, 2011. So yes, indeed, charms have been in the game now for over a decade. That's just kind of hard to believe. Jonathan still has all the first ever charms that you've ever gotten, eh? That's kind of... Let's take a walk down memory lane here and see. I don't know if I used any. I have 1,010 of them for some reason. It is time to arm a different charm, actually. Time to AI upscale, hey, Jonathan? Yeah, 5 rainbow charms. Yes, indeed. That link there. Larry has 5 rainbow charms. Ready to go. Those are pretty good. If you're an avid mapper, you might have a few of those already. Ryan, you don't have that charm. Funny and why? I think that as far as I recall, I think that was Jacob's idea many, many years ago, and could be wrong. I apologize if that was not Jacob's inspiration. I know Jacob illustrated it. That has a very Jacob vibe to it. But yeah, Mustachio showed up. I believe he arrived alongside Ronza. Ronza brought Mustachio to the kingdom. And he set up a charm shop in the mountain. And he's the inventor, the creator of charms. Mustachio brought charms into the world of Nadia. And for a limited time was selling the first ever charm. It's Mustachio's prototype. And was selling them while he was there, and then they went away. That's why they are limited edition. They're a bit of a collectible. They don't really have any meaningful stats, but they have a special place in your heart. It kind of goes to show the value of there's room for some nostalgia, right? Narrative explanation and to it. To kind of go back to maybe what we're discussing earlier on Feedback Friday. There are some concerns from hunters of like, we'll never have an area specific charm ever again. Absolutely not. It's just a tool we want to use in just the right way, when it feels very thematically appropriate, when there's a strong narrative to tell, when it's just fun to do so. And that's really the end goal. But before, we would always go to it. It was the only tool we had in the toolbox. So if we wanted a special effect to happen, like, well, it's got to be a charm. It's got to be a charm. And slowly that kind of meant, well, I can never use a charm to help capture mice. So we want it to be a tool in the toolbox, but we would like some other ones, So it doesn't feel like we're bashing a nail into the wall with the butt end of a screwdriver. No, it's a hammer. We use a hammer for that, and we use a screwdriver for screws. All right. Chip Merkley has 10 of the first ever charms. Jonathan has 50. And that's always is an interesting decision. How many you're going to get? Once they're gone, they're gone. And it's kind of a rare example of a limited edition consumable. There's discontinued ones, but this was just limited edition off the bat. Since day one, you knew they were going away. Be interesting to see how much everyone had. Michelle only got 3. Gold was tight back then. I forget how much they cost. I'd imagine it would feel like a drop in the bucket nowadays, but I'm sure it kind of was a bit of a large amount of gold at the time. Swift, do you still think area-specific charms work well for areas with multiple mechanics like the Sunken City, Labyrinth with the oil charms? Yeah, that's an opportunity as well to make it a little bit more of an interesting choice. Is you get a sort of multiplicative effect. I have trouble pronouncing that word, but I'm going to get my lantern oil burning, and I'm going to double down with a charm, and I'm going to use an extreme one. Again, it's about creating choices that empower a player to achieve a goal, and depending on the goals and the equipment and the resources available to you, ideally it's always nice when different players make different decisions, but it's the right decision for them. That is kind of what we refer to avoiding a dominant strategy. The strategy based on what you have available to you at the time. That usually means there's a lot more interesting choices to be made. When you're playing a board game, a tabletop game, and when you start the game, you don't exactly know what you're going to be doing the entire time. You got to wait to see what the other players do and then modify your strategy to accommodate what the other players are doing. And so, obviously MouseHunt's a little bit more of a simplified game than that, and it's, for the most part, you play alongside players, not against other players for the most part. But there's still room to create those interesting things like, ooh, you know what, I'm kind of low on this resource, so I'm going to adapt my strategy right now, and okay, I'm going to do something a little different. But then next month, you know what, now I have a lot of this. Okay, now I'm going to go through this area a little bit differently. And, that's what we aim to achieve. That's what we strive to do. Daniel, every gold was so precious back then. Babe, will there ever be a last ever charm? That's the sad thing, YX, is at some point in time, there probably will be a last ever charm. And when we make it, we won't even know it. It's like you're hanging out with your best buddies and, growing maybe high school chums. And at some point, you're hanging out for the last time and none of you knew it quite yet. And it's like the same will come with a charm. And you move away from one another, and you didn't realize that you'd never see that person again. Anyway, not to end on a downer here. Alan, any news on the spring egg hunt? We did give a bit of a preview a couple weeks ago. So we did dive into a few of the eggs, gave some teasers. I think there were some pretty darn close, if not spot-on guesses, at least what I saw floating around the Discord server. So we previewed the eggs that were coming. I shouldn't have deleted the slide. I could have flashed that on the screen. Alas, I've deleted it now. I don't have it handy. I believe it was 6 new charms. They're all in the Folklore Forest. I guess we can say that much. I'll get rid of my disclaimer now. Oh, but we should wrap things up. We are well over the hour mark. We are pushing the limits of a lengthy Feedback Friday. So I should wrap things up. I think it'll most likely be Jacob joining you next week. Good Friday is coming up too, so I'd imagine there probably won't be a Feedback Friday, as that's a holiday here. We'll have the day off. Then that means it'll probably be me up next. I think we will be previewing, or at least giving a first glimpse at, get some initial impressions, see what feedback questions we have in regards to the Bountiful Beanstalk. So we might get into a little bit of discussion about just what it means to explore, climb, and hunt in the bountiful beanstalk. I think that'll probably be a topic for whenever I'm on Feedback Friday next. You've probably been seeing Jacob do a lot of illustrations for the bountiful beanstalk. How many times can I say bountiful beanstalk? But he's even kind of moved on. You saw, notice he might have been illustrating some other things. That was, I think, a few astute hunters picked up on. That probably means a lot of the artwork is wrapped up, and that is a accurate observation that we're just about ready to keep on playtesting the expansion of the folklore forest, which will be the bountiful beanstalk, and we'll see what that has in store the next time I'm out for Feedback Friday. So we kind of do a little bit more of our playtesting, kind of form better questions and feedback, curiosities that we might want to preview for hunters, get in, suggestions, impressions, and it often kind of helps shape things right at the end. And it's a little bit easier to adjust things before the release than afterwards, as I often say. Swift, we only saw 2 mice. Really? I thought he illustrated more than 1. Or more than 2, sorry. I guess he did 2 more than 1. All right, clearly I'm beginning to fatigue as I can no longer articulate words after speaking for an hour straight. I'm going to call it a day there, hunters. Well, actually, I'm going to go grab lunch. I'm not calling it a day, but I'm going to call it a stream as far as Feedback Friday goes. Thank you so much for joining me. A quick recap of everything we went over. Please, if you share this, if you take a screenshot, please don't crop out the big red message at the bottom. Definitely so often, we share sort of our proof of concept, our beta, alpha version of something to get impressions, get feedback. And already it was just great seeing the emotional kind of reactions and some of the initial impressions and suggestions that came up in chat. So I'm looking forward to, keeping my ear to the ground, whether it's in different groups and chats and stuff, and see what else comes up in discussion. I'm going to try to be a fly on the wall in as many rooms as possible to help mold some of this charm work we're doing here, as well as kind of the stats, the cost adjustments there as well, just kind of general sentiments as we'll be keeping our ear to the ground. I hit the wrong button and I just took myself right off camera. I was just talking to myself for a short while. All right, I'm going to wrap up as I can no longer even click things in front of me. Have a fantastic weekend, hunters. I'll catch you next time. Happy hunting, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll catch you next time.
Have you ever gave up hope, looking for a way to cope, all alone in a castle by yourself, knowing you were made to rule, looking like a royal fool, if you only had someone to help. We got to clean these rodents out. There ain't no way we're gonna let them run this place. I'll show them what this king's about. It won't be long before we get them on the run. Here's what I propose we do. I'm gonna count on you, give you all the cheese that you could ever want. If you wanna be your best, put your trap up to the test. Buy some super brie and watch the suckers come. Oh, yeah. We got to clean these rodents out. There ain't no way we're gonna let them run this place. I'll show them what this king's about. It won't be long before we get them on the run. We got to clean these rodents out. looking for a way to cope, all alone in a castle by yourself.